Today, I want to show you guys 10 of history most female infamous serial killers and their grisly crimes. In the late 1990s, an elite FBI agent claimed that there are no female serial killers, but guys, that is not true, because we've heard stories of how women bite, killed, and brutally murdered their victims. Most of them did that because of greed, because they wanted attention, or because they were just sadists. So guys, I'm gonna walk you down 10 of history's most female serial killers, and at the end of this video I'm gonna tell you why, because I know by now you're gonna be wondering amongst yourselves, crackhead, what is the need for this news? What is the need of this story? Don't worry, sit back, relax, watch this video, and at the end I'm gonna explain to you why I am bringing this up. Number 1, Gwendolyn Graham and Kathy Wood. In the 1980s, Gwendolyn Graham and Kathy Wood killed 5 elderly women while working at the old Alpine Minor Nursing Home in Michigan. The murderous lovers allegedly picked their victims based on the initials of their first or last names in hopes of spelling out murder. They were caught before they could do so, and Graham remains in prison to this day. However, Wood was released in 2020. Number 2, Eileen Wuornos. Eileen Wuornos killed 7 men over the course of a single year. Wuornos had long made a living as a sex worker, but in 1989, she started murdering and robbing her clients. Wuornos sometimes insisted that everyone she killed was a rapist and that she'd kill them in self-defense. But other times, she would say she was just after her clients' money. She was ultimately executed for her crimes. Number 3, Lavinia Fisher. America's first known female killer was purportedly Lavinia Fisher. In the early 1800s, she and her husband John made their living by luring wealthy people into their inn, murdering them and robbing them after they died. Legend has it that Lavinia would serve their visitors poison tea and invite them to lie down when they didn't feel well. Then her husband John would rob them and sometimes finish the job of killing them if the tea didn't work. They were eventually executed for other crimes in 1820, and since then some have questioned whether this couple was truly as murderous as legend claims. Number 4, Daria Nikolaevna Saltykova. Daria Nikolaevna Saltykova, an 18th century Russian noblewoman, would brutally beat and torture the girls and young women who worked for her so badly that more than 100 of them died at her hands. Their families cried out for justice, but because they were just peasants and Saltykova was so powerful, it took years before anyone even bothered to investigate. When investigators finally searched her home, they found that about 138 of the serfs under her care had died, all under suspicious and brutal circumstances. Saltykova was then sentenced to life in prison for her crime. Number 5, Mary Bell. Mary Bell was only 10 years old when she killed for the first time. She lured a 4-year-old boy into an abandoned home in England and then strangled him to death in 1968. After getting away with her first murder, Bell teamed up with a friend named Norma Bell to kill again. The pair strangled a 3-year-old this time and then brutally cut his flesh with scissors, mutilating his penis and carving an M for Mary into his stomach. When she was caught, Mary Bell was sentenced to 12 years in prison, and after the widespread outrage over her release, she was eventually given a new name and a secret address to protect her privacy. That was too bad of the government as a then. How just 12 years for killing 2 kids? That was wrong of the government. Anyways, let's move ahead. Number 6, Myra Hindley. In the 1960s, Myra Hindley and her boyfriend Ian Brady murdered 5 children. Hindley would lure young children so that Brady could rape and kill them. Sometimes Hindley recorded his horrific attacks. Once called the most evil woman in Britain, Hindley was imprisoned for life for her role in the murder spree. Number 7. Gesche Gottfried. In the early 19th century, German serial killer Gesche Gottfried poisoned 15 people, including her parents, her twin brother, her children, and her husbands. She killed those closest to her by slipping them arsenic in their food. And after her victims began to feel sick, she turned to them and then continued to poison them. She was eventually caught and killed in a public execution in 1831. This was a brutal woman, very, very brutal. As in, she will poison you, and then will poison you, and then will poison you, killing her parents, her children, her brothers. Well, this woman, even when she gets to hell, she deserves another punishment in hell, more than the punishment that the average person will receive in hell. Number 8. Rosemary West. British serial killer couple Fred and Rosemary West killed at least 12 young women and girls from the late 1960s to the late 1980s, including their own children. Rosemary West was eventually sentenced to life in prison while her husband killed himself behind bars. Good for the husband and good for Rosemary as well. And number 9, Elizabeth Bathory. Elizabeth Bathory has been called the most prolific female killer of all time. Between 1590 and 1610, she allegedly tortured and murdered up to 650 girls and young women. At first, Bathory only murdered peasants, luring them in by hiring them as serving girls in her castle and then beating and torturing them to death. When she realized that she was getting away with all her crimes, she began luring in some of the lesser gentry as well. Bathory would burn, starve, and mutilate the girls under her care. She'd scald them with tongues, cover them in honey and ants, and even bite the flesh off of their faces before giving them the mercy of death. She was eventually sentenced to house arrest. What? Sentenced only to house arrest? But let's look further. She was eventually sentenced to house arrest for her life due to her crimes. But in the years since then, some historians have questioned whether at least some of Bathory's murders were exaggerated. Yeah, 650? That's a lot. It could have been exaggerated. But she was still a serial killer for the fact that she killed many people. It doesn't matter the number. If you kill more than one, you are a serial killer. So Bathory was a serial killer. Let's go over to the final one. Number 10. Dorothea Puente. Known as the Death House landlady, Dorothea Puente was a serial killer who preyed on elderly and disabled people living at her California boarding house in the 1980s. Puente killed at least 9 people under her care in order to cash their social security checks, and buried most of their bodies in her backyard until she was finally caught and sentenced to life in prison. Meaning that Dorothea Puente should still be in prison till now. I remember I told you guys I was gonna tell you why I'm telling you this story, even though it's really not necessary. You know, in life they say whatever a man can do, a woman can do better. This was why I read this news to you. So next you think that a woman cannot do something bad, think again, because even in our contemporary times around you, you've heard stories of women doing evil and bad things. So once again, what a man can do, a woman can do better. This was the purpose of this news. It's your boy, the Crackhead, wishing you all a wonderful day. Bye.